When Picasso Met Mootisse by Nina Layden. There was once a young pig named Pigasso. While the other piglets rolled in the mud and played games, Picasso painted. He painted anything and everything, and in a most unusual way. At the same time, there was once a young bull named Mootisse. Mootisse was not like other bulls. He wasn't interested in bullfighting. Mootisse was happy only when he painted pictures, and he painted big, bold, bright pictures. In time, word of Picasso's talent spread throughout the pig provinces. Soon, art-loving pigs from all over lined up to buy his creations. At the same time, Mootisse was getting famous in the cattle community. There wasn't many households that didn't own a masterpiece. Picasso and Mootisse were becoming art superstars, but this came with a price. Everybody wanted to see them. Art buyers, art sellers, art students, art historians, art groupies. It was an art attack. One day, Picasso got fed up and said, "I'm tired of this noisy pig pen." At the same time, Mootisse declared, "I'm sick of this crowded cow town." Needing a change, they both decided to look for a peaceful place where they could paint without distractions. So, each of the two artists looked far and wide for the perfect spot. Picasso found a lovely farm looking towards the east. Mootisse found a handsome farm facing the west. After Picasso moved in, he went to introduce himself to his new neighbor across the road. At the same time, Mootisse went to introduce himself to his new neighbor across the road. That is how Picasso met Mootisse. And coincidentally, that is how Mootisse met Picasso. At first, Picasso and Mootisse were friendly and welcomed each other as neighbors, but soon things began to change. It started one day when Picasso criticized one of Mootisse's paintings. Then Mootisse made fun of one of Picasso's. Mootisse called Picasso an art hog. Then Picasso called Mootisse a mad cow. Mootisse quipped, "You paint like a 2-year-old." Picasso retorted, "You paint like a wild beast." Mootisse raged, "Your colors look like mud." Picasso spat, "Your paintings look like color by numbers." Then things really got out of hand. It was a modern art mess. Picasso stormed off into his house. "That Mootisse doesn't like my art," he nuffed. "Well, I'll show him." And Mootisse bullied his way into his house. "I'll give that Picasso something he can really criticize," he snorted. Then a full-scale feud erupted. But it was a most unusual battle. Armed with ladders and buckets of paint, Mootisse launched the first attack. He started at dawn. By the end of the evening, he had succeeded in transforming the outside of his house into a monster-sized masterpiece. Not to be outdone, Picasso fired up his paintbrushes and in full view of the enemy, counterattacked. He turned his farm into a huge and outrageous work of art. The two artists then retreated into their houses and pulled down the shades. Picasso certainly didn't want to look out his window and stare at a Mootisse, and Mootisse had no desire to give his rooms a view of a Picasso. This presented a problem, and there seemed to be only one solution. Without a word to each other, Picasso and Mootisse each began to build a huge wooden fence down the middle of their road. At first, Picasso and Mootisse seemed satisfied. Both artists went back to painting by themselves. But after a while, Picasso was surprised to find that he missed that bull-headed Mootisse. And at the same time, Mootisse found his studio empty without the presence of pig-headed Picasso. Picasso wondered that Mootisse isn't such a bad artist. He has some interesting ideas. Mootisse moaned, "That Picasso may not paint like me, but he knows what he's doing." However, being naturally pig-headed and bull-headed, neither artist knew how to apologize to the other. So they did what they do best. They let their paintbrushes do the talking. Picasso painted on one side of the fence and Mootisse painted on the other side. Each worked until they were exhausted. It was strangely quiet when they were done. Then, curious to see what Mootisse had been doing, Picasso sprinted around the other side. At the same time, Mootisse galloped over to see Picasso's side. The silence was broken as the two artists began laughing at their amazing work of art. From that day on, Picasso and Mootisse became great friends. They happily took down the fence and shared their different views. A few months later, a big museum bought the fence. Picasso called his side When Picasso Met Mootisse. Mootisse called his side When Mootisse Met Picasso. The critics called it incredible. The true story of Picasso and Mootisse. Picasso and Mootisse were not a pig and bull, but they were characters. They were two of the finest artists of the 20th century. While they were never neighbors, they became close in the small world of art. Henri Mootisse was born on December 31st of 1869 in France. Mootisse didn't want to be an artist when he was little. He studied to be a lawyer. But when he was 21, he got sick with appendicitis. While he was getting better, he painted his first painting. He liked painting so much that he ended his law career. Pablo Picasso was born on October 25th of 1881 in Spain. His father was an art teacher who helped Picasso start painting when he was very young. It was soon obvious that he was very talented. Picasso studied painting in Barcelona and Madrid, two big cities in Spain. But as he was growing as an artist, Picasso decided to move to Paris, which was and still is a great city for art. That is where Picasso met Mootisse. Both Picasso and Mootisse were gaining recognition as artists in Paris. In fact, two Americans named Leo and Gertrude Stein, who lived there, started collecting their paintings. In 1906, Gertrude Stein had a party, and that is where Picasso and Mootisse met for the first time. At first, Picasso and Mootisse were friendly to each other. They even traded paintings. Mootisse also gave Picasso an African mask, which inspired him to paint a primitive style, a style he became very famous for. But soon it became apparent that Picasso and Mootisse were becoming rivals and competitors. Picasso said some bad things about Matisse's paintings, and Mootisse said some bad things about Picasso's. But over time, the two artists learned to respect each other and become lifelong friends. They both owned many of each other's paintings. Mootisse once told Picasso, "We must talk to each other as much as we can. When one of us dies, there will be some things the other will never be able to talk of with anyone else." Mootisse died in 1954. Picasso died in 1973, but their art lives on in many museums, galleries, and private collections around the world.